Hey guys, what's up? I'm super excited to announce my first partnership, and that is with Onnit, the supplement company. That's ONNIT. They have all kinds of stuff. They have kettlebells. If you're into working out with kettlebells, just go check out their website. They're a supplement company, Human Optimization. I really like taking their Total Human package. It's got Alpha Brain. It's got New Mood for Night. It's got, what else does it have? Shroom Tech and just a whole bunch of stuff. So it's a 2-time packet, 2 times a day packet, right? You have a packet for the day, a packet for the morning. It's super easy. But they have all kinds of stuff. They have a joint health, and man, a great company, super holistic. So go check them out. Onnit, ONNIT. Up in the top right corner, type in the code name Eliot, ELIOT. Again, code name Eliot, and you will receive 10% off all of your orders on Onnit. ONNIT.com, code name Eliot, and there you go, 10%. Thanks, guys. Hey guys, a couple of updates on me and the podcast. So first of all, always go check out EliotMarshall.com for all things related to what I'm doing in the podcast. Most notably on that, some DBAB t-shirts. Don't be a bitch, don't be a bully. They should be out here soon. So I'll have a store up on the website here within, maybe now, maybe a week or so, depending on when you're listening to this. So go check out the store to get your DBAB t-shirt. Super simple design. Hope you like it. Grab one. Secondly, I have created a Patreon page, and Patreon is a really great way to support the podcast if you like it. A lot of great producers, podcasters use it. Sam Harris, Dan Carlin. It's real simple, man. If you like it, then go support. That's it's the most holistic way. You like it. You find this podcast helpful, show some love if you could, please. I have some levels, $1 donation per month, $5 donation per month. That will come with some jiu-jitsu video. So if you're into jiu-jitsu, then there you go. And then the $10 a month come with some jiu-jitsu video and a little motivational stuff. So that would be great to check out that, patreon.com/the Gospel of Fire. And lastly, I'll be competing again soon, December the 8th at the Onnit Invitational. So all of that money will go towards Justin Wren and his fight for the forgotten. So yeah, we're gonna everything we do is gonna go towards that. I'm doing a seminar hopefully at the Onnit Academy the day after on December the 9th in Austin, Texas. So that's what we've got coming up. Again, that all of that money will go towards Fight for the Forgotten and Justin Wren. Well, not him personally, but his Fight for the Forgotten. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoy the episode, and we'll talk to you later. Hey, guys, this is Eliot Marshall, former UFC fighter, and this is the Gospel of Fire, where we're going to go through the fire to learn the best way to live our life. All right, guys, here we are, next episode of the Gospel of Fire, and I am here with the babysitter to the stars. Let's roll the whole, baby. Burt Watson, what's up?
Man, I'm trying to make it, baby. How about yourself, Eliot?
I'm doing great, man. I think about you a lot, man. I'm going
to tell you, man, it's a pleasure hearing from you, and it's always a pleasure working with you and going back, taking myself back into time a little bit. And, just sharing some good times, baby.
Man, it's one of those things, Burt, for me where, fighting, let's explain to everybody what you did. Some people might not know, right? Like, so when you show up at a fight, especially for the UFC, like the top diggity of them all,
right.
Burt was the first person you saw when you got to the hotel. They took you right to Burt. And when you got to Burt, he was like, that's why you got the nickname Babysitter of the Stars. I think Rogan gave it to you. Just did everything for us. Like, it didn't matter. If we needed something, you handled it.
Well, it's first of all, it's unbelievable to see and to realize what you guys have to go through during the course of your training, during the course of the week leading up to a fight, and the things that you go through, not only for your physical and your technical preparation, but your mental preparation. And, it's been my experience in working not only in boxing but transitioning to MMA, to see the things that you guys had to go through. So it was my objective. And see, you guys, when I say you guys, meaning you fighters, and
Right.
you included, you guys during the course of the week in preparation for a fight, you put any ancillary thing you could on the top of your head. Whatever it was or whatever you could put on there, you did. And I ultimately saw that as I went along through boxing and MMA. And my objective was to take any bit of those little ancillary things off your head that you had to think about and to worry about. And number one, that was you guys showing up on site, showing up knowing that your hotel room was ready. You were picked up at the airport. When you got to the hotel, knowing that you probably spent the last month and a half trying to cut weight. So the very first thing on your mind is grabbing the scale to see where your weight was, making sure you were able to cut weight during the course of the week. So I tried to have all those things in place and prepared so that when you got there and you got to me, the first thing I saw you was that I had those things in place and that I had the things and I was prepared to give you a comfort level. So when you guys showed up, the first person you came to was me. The first thing I did, I brought you in, made sure you guys got checked in, in terms of checking in and getting your paperwork done and getting the commission work for your license and those things done. And I took you right to the scale, and that was my way of giving you an idea of where you were. I mean, you probably knew where you were when you left home, but with the travel and the drinking the water and probably sneaking a little bite here and a little bite there.
Sneaking what bites?
Yeah. Either on the plane or at the airport. The first thing you wanted to do was to see where your weight was. So I had a scale prepared for you to hop on and see where it was. And that way, I mean, right away, you guys got one step in that comfort level clicked off.
That's man. That was so nice, just because I think one of the things that people don't understand is they only see that fight that takes place in the cage on Saturday night. They don't see that fight that most of us go through on the scale with the scale. And that's a long fight. That's a long, grueling fight. It's not a 15-minute fight.
Hey, let me tell you something. For most fighters and most guys, a scale was almost as important as getting paid.
That's right.
So the fact that you had a good scale and a proper scale, and I always wanted to make sure that when it came time for the weigh-in, and you guys, because the weigh-in is the ultimate check, the ultimate time. Mm-hmm. When it came time for weigh-in, you guys had to either be on weight or you faced the consequences of not making weight. So I wanted to make sure that when you guys came to the weigh-in and stepped on the scale, it was not the first time you ever saw the scale that you stepped on. And that was one of my own little things that I kind of put into the mix, so that if you stepped on the scale, the last thing I wanted you to do is look down and say, where the hell did this scale come from? I never saw this scale before. So you know what? I gave you that scale all week. If it meant me having to somehow incur back to the promotion the cost of having that scale certified twice or 2 times during the course of the week, I did that.
Yeah, man. Burt, I guess one of my questions for you, I got a couple for you, man. Like, I was never, for me personally, right? I was never a big name fighter, right? I was never the main event, co-main event, anything like that. But you never treated any of us any different. It was the same whether you were Anderson Silva at the time, because he or GSP for you probably at the time were the 2 top guys,
Right.
Or whether you were Eliot Marshall on mostly undercard fights. I think I hit the main card once. It was all the same, man. But the Burt Watson that I got was the Burt Watson that Anderson got, and I saw it. I just saw I'd be walking by and I'd see you dealing with Anderson. You'd be dealing with Anderson just like you dealt with me, or I'm sure every other lower level guy. What was it that made you able to do that? Because most people don't, right? Most people go, oh, all right, you just you go do your thing. Anderson, where you at? Because you're the show. Anderson was the show.
Well, first of all, you have to maintain and gain a level of respect a level of respect for everybody or anybody that stepped into that cage. Because when you stepped into that cage, whether you were Anderson Silva or Silva Anderson, the bottom line and the results were the same. You had to fight a fight. And the respect level for you guys to be able to do that had to be shown not only from the time you came in, but throughout the entire course of the week. You know, I've worked with a lot of fighters, being in MMA and boxing, and I've seen the times when maybe the main event guy, you know, got a little better, more preferential treatment than maybe the guy that was fighting the opening fight, or a guy that was in a swing bout. Now I'm talking about boxing. And, you know, I always said that I was never going to be that person or that guy.
Well, for sure, because the promotion does it. Like, I mean, I know. You probably won't, but the promotion does it. You know, like
it's a part of the process,
Yeah.
Eliot. A part of the process is them to promote,
right? Of course.
Part of promotion is to promote those entities that they feel are going to carry the promotion or bring in the pay-per-view numbers or whatever. And you know what? And I understood that, but I also knew that behind the scenes, when it came to the things that you guys needed, I didn't have to adhere to that.
Right.
I didn't have to treat anybody any differently. And you guys, one thing that made me do the things that I did and kind of made me happy was that you guys have a fraternity. And I don't know if you know that or not, but there's a little bit of a fraternity with you fighters and your camps and the guys that wrestle and jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, the guys that are specialized in grappling. There's a fraternity. You guys let Burt Watson into that fraternity. And I was so very appreciative of that I really didn't know how to treat anybody any differently. And I gave to you what you guys gave to me was respect. But I went at that respect first.
Yeah,
I went at it first, and when you gave it back to me, it was very easy for me to treat everybody the same. And I'll tell you one thing that I found out real quick is that you guys notice and remember everything. So you know what? With that in mind, and me knowing that the ultimate goal was the same for everybody, whether you were the main event, the co-main event, or the prelim, or the swing bout, it was the same. Everybody got into their cage. You fought your 3 5-minute rounds. If you got hurt, you saw the same doctor. If you had to go to the hospital, you rode in the same ambulance. So, you know, I wanted to make that entire journey with a comfort level for everybody.
Man, I have to say you did it, man. Because like if there's one thing about fighting in the UFC, you know, while you were there that everyone talks about, it's you. You know, like it's like don't get me wrong, like I love the experience. You know, I love the experience of the UFC itself. Like I agree with you. Like it's a special thing. You know, that those of us, especially, you know, especially I would say 5 or 6 years ago when there weren't so many shows and it was much harder to get to the UFC, you know, yeah, that was very special. And having you, I'm like, I always wondered, I'm like, God damn, I think he wants me to win my fight. You know, and I'm sure that you did the same for my opponent, but I wasn't thinking about that. I was like, fuck yeah, man. I know that there's one dude in this building that wants me to win my fight that is not like my best friend, you know, like it's Burt Watson. Burt Watson wants me to win my fucking fight.
And you know what? Without a doubt, that's exactly how I felt. I wanted everybody to win, and I wanted everybody to feel that I wanted them to win.
Yeah, man.
So when I touched you, I wanted to touch everybody. I remember a time when going way back, and you know what? I'm gonna mention names because I got them names in my pocket.
Go ahead.
And I actually touched people, and I actually worked. You know, you hear people say, "Well, I did this and I did that." There were times I was at the airport, and I'd be sitting at the airport, and this was early on when it first started, and I would be just kind of chit-chatting and talking to a guy, and a guy would say, "Oh, you know what? I was at the UFC this weekend, and I fought in there, and I'm looking at this guy, and my brain is going 1,000 miles an hour, and I'm looking at this. I know this guy didn't just tell me that he fought. Now, this was before, people got to know who I was and got to know me. But this was somebody that just went to the fight, and he would tell me that. So, you know what?
So hold on. This guy didn't fight? Like, he didn't fight that night, and he told you that he just fought in the UFC?
Didn't fight at all. Never saw the guy before in my life. I'm sitting there looking at him, and I'm saying, now, should I call him out, or should I just let him have that moment? And you know what I did? I let him have that moment, and I found a way to get away from him, because eventually, if he kept talking, I probably would have called him out, but I let him go. But it's those things when you realize the things that give people a comfort level, and you can do those things without criticizing or without jeopardizing anybody else. You do it. I would always have meetings, before the weigh-in or weigh-in day, to kind of talk to everybody, to tell you guys what was going to go on for the weigh-in or the night before, and just kind of give you that little Burt energy. And I'd have the meeting, and we were sitting in, and I think we were at the MGM. And one thing I believed in, you made weight and you came in on time. If you did those two things, you disrespected me and you disrespected everybody else in the room. So we're sitting in the room, gathering around. I'm giving everybody my little speech. And I look up, and here comes Mr. John Jones, a little late for the meeting. Now, this was probably the second fight. It was his first, not intentionally late. He just was a little late. But you know what? If I tell you a meeting's at 12 o'clock, 12:01, you're late, baby. 11:59, I might be a little angry, but 12 o'clock is 12 o'clock. So when he came down and walked in the room, and it was like maybe three minutes or so, I stopped the meeting. And I said, you know what? Come over here a minute, son. He walked around in front of the room, in front of everybody. And I said, you know what? I'm going to tell you something. That there's nobody in this room bigger than this room. There's nobody in this room bigger than this sport. And when you show up late, when you don't make weight, you disrespect me, yourself, and everybody in this room. I said, that's how it starts and that's how it ends, man. It can't be any different than that. But that was also my opportunity to say that in front of everybody.
Yeah, man.
And he looked at me and he said, you know what, Mr. Burt, I'm sorry. And everybody in here, I'm sorry. And he walked on out and walked on back. At the end of the meeting, I walked over and I said, damn, did I just say that shit to John Jones? Did I just call that man out in the room in front of everybody? But you know what? I did that because I felt that, and I know that needed to be done. Not only, I'm probably 3 times older than any one of you guys, but it was the way that I handled things. I gave you as much respect as I could. You know what I always told a hotel? When we go to a hotel, and we usually have anywhere from 35 to 50 rooms, fighters and camps and all, and fans and everything. I'd find out. I had a contact person at every hotel who dealt with me and me only, and I'd find out who the security person was. And I'd go to that person, and I'd go to the security person. And I said, do me a favor, baby. You call me before you call the cops. Now, the first time I said that, they looked at me a little strange. But then I looked at them again, and I said, I'll tell you, I got a hotel full of young men, full of fighters, cutting weight, probably don't want to cut weight, don't want to be here. I said, and there might be a little bit of a disturbance for your other guests. Do me a favor, you call me before you call the cops. And I can't tell you how many times I've had that happen. That they came and they knocked on my door. I remember one night when I'm in my room about 9 o'clock, and I usually shut down around 8:30 or 9 o'clock because I was up at 5:30 every morning. And I got a call from the front desk, and it said, Mr. Watson, we got a problem on the 7th floor. Guys up there, you know, they're making a little too much noise and disturbing the other guests. So, first of all, I was pissed because I had to get out of my bed to go do that. Third, I'm saying, now, you know, this makes no sense. Now, I'm old school, bro. I'm a hood rat with an education. I grew up in Philly. So, I also know things that are just instinctive things. And that's also a part of what I use in dealing with my job and dealing with you guys. I instinctively did what I knew was best for me when I grew up. So, and what my mom used to do to me. So I got on the elevator and I went on up to the 7th floor. Aside from being mad and pissed that I had to get out of bed, I don't like heights. So I didn't want to be up on no damn 7th floor. So I walked off the elevator and I got halfway to the hall and I could hear the noise. But you know what, you guys, I would make sure that half of the card was on one side of the hotel, the other half was on the other side. There were a couple of times I might have miscued a little bit, but without you guys knowing it, I always made sure you guys were kind of half-ass separated.
Yeah, I was never on the same floor as my opponent, that's for sure.
Or tried to, you know, either the same floor or different sides of the hotel or whatever. So I walked up to the hall. The guys had the doors open, and they were running back and forth from room to room and you know, having fun and having a good time. Just young fighters, what they did. So, you know, now I guess I'm allowed to curse a little bit.
Oh, you can say whatever you want.
So I walked up to the top of the hall, and I could see them running. And I looked down the hall, and you know, when I'm ready to take my voice up another octave, I know how to do that real easy. Okay? And when I want to be heard, I know how to do that real easy. So I got to the top of the hall, and I said, I know damn well y'all didn't have the hotel call me to come up on this floor to tell y'all to shut the hell up. Got real quiet. And I heard somebody say, shit, word. And I heard that was the doors closed. Every door that was open was closed. And I just stood there for a minute. I walked away.
And that was it. No more.
Well, I know the doors were shut. And I said, and you better not make me come back up here. Then I walked away.
Hell yeah. Man, you said you grew up in Philly, right?
Yes, sir.
Where in Philly? My parents, I'm an East Coast boy too, and my parents live in Philly now.
Well, I grew up in Philly on 60th Street, 60th and Girard Avenue, which was at the time the heart of the hood. But I grew up in Philly. I started elementary school. I went to junior high school. I went to high school in Philly. I'm a Philly guy, man. I'm a Philly native. I left Philly in '67, and I went away. I went away to high school. I went away to college. I went to a small college in Scottsbluff, Nebraska.
Man, you know? how'd you end up in Nebraska from Philly?
Well, first of all, my mom said, I don't know where you're going, but you're getting the hell out of here. You ain't sticking around.
That's what I tell my kids, too.
Yeah, you ain't sticking around Philly no more. We getting you out of here. So, you know, I ran track in high school, and I was pretty fast, bro. You know, I was, I think in 66 or so, man, I was doing damn near 11, 10, 9 or so. I was speed. So I went away. I applied to school where I was probably going to go to get the track. And my mom heard about this college in Scottsbluff, Nebraska. She applied. That was the first college that got back to me. And that was the first person my mom said, you know what, you're packing clothes because you're gone. I ended up in Scottsbluff, Nebraska, which was I'd say about a 4-hour drive from Omaha. And everybody out there, anybody out there that looked like me was an Indian.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's not too many black people out there in the 60s, huh?
Bruh. And when I say Native American, they actually lived up another level in their own little community. And when they came into town, they rode horses and tied them up in the back of the building, did whatever they did, got back in their horses and rode on up. Wow. You know, and I was kind of floored to see that because I didn't know that still existed.
Sure, you didn't see that. You're from the city, and the city is the city.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I'm from the city, but my mom is Jamaican, and my dad is from the South, Charleston, South Carolina. So during the course of my upbringing, I was every summer I was packed up and shipped down to my grandmother in Charleston, South Carolina, who sold bootleg liquor out of her kitchen, okay? And I hid up under the table and counted the money. And during the course of the week, when she plowed the field, I rode a mule.
Yeah, my dad, he grew up in South Jersey and has a very similar story. He used to get packed up and sent to North Carolina. You know, I want to say his family's from Charlotte, right outside of Charlotte. He went. So very similar. Like, all right, boy, you get your clothes. You're going down to see your grandma.
Going down to see, and Granny sold bootleg liquor, you know, and I wasn't allowed in the room while she was selling liquor, but I had to stay on the back porch and count her money while she got paid. Make sure that money was right.
Yeah, for sure.
And during the course of the week, you know, we rode a mule to plow a field.
So how did you get into boxing? Because that's where you went first, right? Before MMA, you know, like you were in the boxing game. So tell us,
well,
how did you get there?
I'm going to tell you, and I'll make it as brief as I can. And it is probably, probably one of the most unreal stories in my lifetime. I was actually working in the fashion industry. I was working for Burlington Industries, and I sold piece goods to manufacturers of men's suits.
And where were you at this point in your life?
That was after the Marine Corps, and I had moved to Ridgewood, New Jersey, which is maybe a half an hour outside of New York with my family.
Okay.
With my wife, and at the time I didn't have any kids, but I was on my way.
Gotcha.
But so I commuted from Ridgewood, New Jersey to Manhattan, and I worked in the garment district. And one day I'm walking from 42nd Street, which was the bus depot, to my office, which was on 56th and 6th Avenue. As I'm walking down the street, there's a car accident. So all the traffic, and at that time in Manhattan, the traffic was a little crazy. All the traffic was stopped and the cars were stopped. And there was a car there, and out of the car comes Joe Frazier. I looked at him, and I'm looking, I'm saying, nah, that can't be. But he was in a limo headed someplace and was not involved in the accident, but stuck in the traffic and got out. So, right naturally, I kind of made my way over to say, hey. He said, hey, back.
Because he's a Philly guy, right? He's a Philly guy, too.
Yeah, and we were talking, and I brought it up. I said, man, I'm from Philly, and yada, yada, yada. And he was telling me, yeah, I got a gym, and I'm starting a limousine service in Philly, and yada, yada, yada. And Joe was such a nice, he was plain Joe. That's the way he was. They say Joe had a reputation of picking up strays. And that reputation meant that if he saw you and he talked to you, he would talk to you. If he had a job he could give you, he would give it to you. That's the way
you're not going to tell me right now that there was a fucking car accident and Joe Frazier got out of the car and this is how you got into boxing?
I'm telling
you. You just happened to walk over to Joe Frazier and talk to him.
I walked over to him and I started talking to him. We exchanged numbers to the gym and back and forth. So I said, you know what? I'll call you, and if I'm ever in Philly, He said, sure, why not? So, about 2 months later, I called the gym, and guess what? They put him on the line.
Oh, and where was he at this point in his career? Was he already the heavyweight champ yet, or no?
Yes, he was, and his last fight was in 1980 or 81 with Jumbo Cummings, but this was just before the Thriller in Manila, which was 1974, 75.
Somewhere in there, yep, mid-70s.
Yeah. So he was big time.
This is the height of Joe Frazier.
And I had no idea that he would accept my call and exchange numbers. So we did. And we stayed friends. When I say friends, because I called him, he returned my call, and we communicated. And when I came to Philly, I came and I called him, and in between, my niece was getting married. I know Joe had a limousine service. So I called him to say, listen, my niece is getting married, and I'd like to. Well, ironically, a friend of my mother's had already contacted his limousine company to do my niece's wedding. He said, hey, I think we got a call to do that. He did the wedding. God's honest truth, man. Guess who drove the car to the wedding?
Not him. Come on.
Joe Frazier himself.
The heavyweight champion of the world, Joe Frazier, is driving limousines.
Drove. You know what? This is well documented. Maybe the first time a lot of people are hearing it, but he had a limousine company that he called Smoking Joe Limo, and Joe was a tinkerer. He was the type of guy that he would get in a car in a heartbeat and drive it someplace just to see how fast it could go, or just to do the trip. He was one of those guys that he would say, you know what, I feel like going someplace or doing something, boom, he'd grab it and he'd go do it. Well, one thing led to another. We became friends, and I would come to Philly, and my job had moved me from New Jersey to New York. I would come back and forth to Philly, hang out. My mom was there. And at the time I was in transition, and I said to myself, you know what? I think I'm going to move back to Philly. So I did. And Joe Frazier and I started hanging out. Now this was when just at the point of his retirement, we had stayed friends and stayed in communications that long time. And we started hanging out, going out. And, I was never a real heavy drinker, but I still drink Grand Marnier and chase it with a Heineken, but I don't get drunk. And it got to a point once where I said, you know what, Joe? You're going to either have to hire me or leave me the hell alone. Just like that. And he said, you know what? You quit your job and come on over here. I'll give you one.
And what'd you do?
Quit my job and went on over there.
Yeah, what'd you do for Joe Frazier? What'd you do? What was your job?
He brought me in to run the gym and to manage. He had a gym, he had a limo service, he had a few fighters, and most of Joe's people at the time, I'll say people that controlled most of his finances and other things like that, did not live in Philadelphia or were not close to that area. So ultimately, Joe was in Philly with those things kind of, I don't know how he ran them before I came in, but I know that the people that were in control of his finances and his annuities and things like that were not in Philly. He communicated with them via phone or he would send them a Western Union or something like that. So he brought me in to run the gym and to manage the fighters and to manage, the limo service. And that all kind of culminated to being his manager. When he started getting calls for personal appearances and different marketing things and stuff like that, he would push it on to me.
So you guys were tight, like real tight.
I'm telling you. And within a year and a half, he said, you know what? He said, here's what we'll do. He said, anything that comes in, and as it comes in, you get it, you get 10%, and I get the rest of the money. Well, I was still in awe that Smoking Joe Frazier had me sitting in his office in a seat running that business. And didn't know my capabilities, but I can tell you something, baby. I learned real fast.
Yeah, man, I bet.
I learned real fast and made no mistakes, because if he didn't pay attention to anything else, he paid attention to when his money wasn't right and you made a mistake.
Yeah, man. I mean, from my experience with you, like the details is where you crushed it. You know, the details, like the little things, so, you know, for instance, now in the UFC, like, look, the same things happen, right? There's still somebody there and there's still somebody, you know, but it's the details, man. The devil's in the details.
Oh, well, you know, I got that, number one, from my mom. And secondly, I spent 3 years in the Marine Corps. You know, so attention to detail not only made a man and a better man out of you, but in some instances it saved my life. So I learned how to organize things. I mean, I was pressing my jeans shit when I was in junior high school. I was ironing my clothes and folding them up and putting them in order when I was back then, because we had to, because there was 13 people in my house. If you didn't put your stuff in the right spot, you ended up wearing somebody else's clothes. Okay.
You grew up with 13 people in the same house.
Yes. Yes. 7 of them were my real siblings, and everybody else was, whenever anybody moved from the South or wherever to Philly, they came to my house first. That was everybody's first stop. That was everybody's stop to stay until they got themselves together, and then they would move out.
So you had this like rotating door of a lot of people in your house.
Two of them. Two of them. And everybody brought some SHIT with them, and my mom wasn't having it, and I learned to pay attention to detail. When I went into the military, it was more attention to detail. Yeah. When I got my job in New York, attention to detail. When I got the job with Joe Frazier, he put my foot to the fire. It was attention to detail, because here I was, never having any experience.
And you asked for it, right? It wasn't like, you were like, hey man, give me this job. So the last thing you could do was blow it.
Give me this job or leave me the hell alone.
Yeah.
And I can tell you something, Eliot. I didn't realize how big Joe was until I really started working with him, you know, and I started meeting Richard Burton. And when Nelson Mandela got out of prison, the first thing he wanted to do was to meet Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier. He called our office, not him, but his people, and we took Joe Frazier's championship belt to the United Nations in New York, and with a private meeting in the basement of the United Nations, where most of the dignitaries came in, and we put that belt around Nelson Mandela's waist. The 3 of us in a room, the 4 of us actually, in a room.
So you, Mandela, Ali, and Joe Frazier.
Me, Ali. Well, he met Ali. He met Ali at another time.
Got it. Okay.
What was me?
Go ahead.
Joe, Nelson, and Nelson's whoever his guy was.
Okay.
With the 4 of us in a room.
What was that relationship like between Ali and Joe Frazier?
There was tension. And the tension was there because Muhammad Ali learned early how it was to not only market himself, make himself marketable, but also how to work a crowd and sell pay-per-view television. You know, one of the first biggest fights in the history of sports was March 8th, 1971, Madison Square Garden, when Joe fought Muhammad Ali, when they sold that on pay-per-view. They found out then how much money they could make from pay-per-view. So Ali knew how to do that, and, you know, he played on it. And somehow along the way, the niche was Joe Frazier. Somehow that happened, and when Ali lost his license, Joe picked up the mantle and was trying to get him to get the license back, because they were told that was going to be such a big money fight. Well, Ali took it a little step further, and he used the platform that he had to kind of go at Joe and taunt Joe, you know, and that's when a lot of that really started. People running their mouth and taunting their opponent. And, you know, Joe took that stuff personally, took it very personal. And Ali continued, and the more he did it, the more personal Joe took it. So that tension between the 2 of them was real. Yes, sir.
And how about like towards like the end of their lives, you know, What was that like for the two of them and being in the mix there? Like it seemed as if they calmed that maybe not the tension, but just maybe some of the animosity down a little. Was that how did that go towards the end of life?
Well, in I think it was 89, a guy by the name of Hollister Whitworth gave me a call. And he had an idea and had some money and had some sponsors and some backers and investors. He had an idea to do a project called Champions Forever, which he was going to take Joe Frazier, Muhammad Ali, Ken Norton, Larry Holmes, and George Foreman, put those 5 guys together and do a video, which is now kind of like, what do you call that stuff on television now? Reality.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
He wanted to do those 5 guys and the fights that they did together, have those guys travel around and do personal appearances and sit in a kind of a horseshoe setting and discuss the fights they had between each other. Well, HBO snapped onto it and did a video called Champions Forever. We did, for the first time, since they fought, they brought Joe Frazier, Muhammad Ali, and all these 5 guys together. We did a tour for that video for about 2.5 years. Between London, I got to meet the Queen, all the royal people. We did Japan, we did Australia, and we traveled to every, the opening of it we did in LA at the Forum at the Wiltern Theater. That was probably the biggest, the most massive press gathering I ever saw in my life with those 5 guys. I think that was the first time I was starstruck when I walked out.
Bigger than when Conor fought when you were running the UFC.
Well, you're talking about now 1989 or so when it was just starting to take momentum. And yeah, I would say with that thing Champions Forever and the first time Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali had really got together and done a tour, I would tell you that there had to be 300 media people with cameras at that event. Now, in 1989, that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's a lot. So with doing that video project and traveling around with those guys, they started to get a little closer. They started to understand a little more about each other. And the tension between them started to kind of wane away a little bit because not only were they traveling together, it had gotten to a point where that thing became so successful, they started to separate the guys. Like they would send Joe and Larry Holmes and Ken Norton one way and Muhammad and George Foreman another way. Then they would switch it up, and the 2 people they would switch up would be Joe and Muhammad. And then they would send them in different directions with the guys. And the one person that did the tour with all of them was me. I was the only person that was on that tour. And Howard Bingham, who at the time was Muhammad Ali's photographer, he was there. But I did we did a night of 100 stars in NBC, with Jerry Rice and Herschel Walker doing ballet and Wilt Chamberlain and Richard Burton. And I can't tell you the amount of people. I'll tell you a quick story. We got a call to make an appearance in LA. So we went to LA to meet this guy. His name was Kenny Johnson. At the time, Kenny Johnston was the manager for Sherman Hemsley. That was George Jefferson.
Okay.
We went out to LA and we met with Kenny Johnston, my first time, but he was, he knew who I was and, he welcomed me like he knew me for years. He said, listen, man, we're going to go out to dinner tonight. I don't remember the name of the restaurant, but it was exclusive. I met downstairs with Joe, we got in the car, we went on to this place for dinner, we met Kenny John. We're sitting at this table at dinner, and then right across, it was a table that sat I'd say maybe about 9 people. And then this group comes in, and this woman sits not at the head of the table, but kind of catty-cornered to me, and this guy sat next to me. So I looked over at Kenny Johnson, and I asked him, I said, why is she sitting there and she looks familiar, you know, kind of who was that? And he said to me, if you don't know who that is, you don't need to be at this table. Well, the woman was Madonna. The guy was Mickey. One of the guys was Mickey Rourke, and the other guy was one of the guys from Kiss.
Gene?
And I don't remember. I don't think it was Gene Simmons because I would have remembered that, but it was one of the other guys. But what I'm remembering is the fact that Mickey Rourke and Madonna were together. And this was when Madonna was Madonna.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, and these are things that would have never happened to me in my lifetime. You know, I mean, but because of Joe Frazier and being with him, you know, it was unbelievable.
Because of a car accident in New York City.
So I stayed with Joe and worked on, and as things went along, eventually in the early 90s or so, things started to get a little lean. So I went to Joe and we were talking, and I said, listen, you know, I got to try to start doing some other things at the same time to try to make it. So he introduced me to Butch Lewis, who was Joe's friend, who had Michael Spinks, and was also getting ready to hook up with Bernard Hopkins, who was getting ready to come out of prison. So Butch Lewis said, you know what? I'll tell you what. You come work my fight, and you do things for me the same way you do them for Blue. That's what Butch Lewis called Joe Frazier. He said, you do your things the same way and run my fight, and I'll pay you. And I said, well, shit, that's pretty easy. And I said to him, and I'm not going to hear your mouth all night. He said, if you run it right, you won't have to hear from me. I ran it right. That was my first job as a coordinator. I ended up doing fights for Michael Spinks, Butch Lewis, Bernard Hopkins, which eventually led to Roy Jones, Oscar De La Hoya, Tito Trinidad, Roberto Duran, Sugar Ray Leonard, Macho Camacho, Julio Cesar Chavez. It eventually led up to meeting Layla Ali. Layla Ali was 25-0. I did 23 of her fights. Ended up doing fights for Showtime and HBO. Meeting Mike Tyson. I did Mike Tyson's last 6 fights. The only person I've never worked with in boxing was Lennox Lewis. Anybody else, Eliot, you can name, I worked with. As a matter of fact, I was in Vegas and I was doing it was Oscar De La Hoya against Arturo Gatti. I was the coordinator for that fight.
Damn,
but that all eventually led from getting my job with Joe to Butch Lewis and all.
Yeah.
So I'm doing this fight because the people hired me to be the coordinator. I had everything. They dumped everything in my lap and I did everything. So as I'm doing this fight, this guy by the name of Bernie Dillon, who was the head guy that was the liaison between the two promoters. Because when you did boxing events, you know, everybody
2 promoters, right? You didn't have just like the UFC. You had 2 different companies normally.
You can have as many as 6. If your top 3 fights were big name, every side needed to be represented. So if you had 3 top fights, you had 6 promoters. Their names had to be put somewhere. So I did Arturo Gatti and De La Hoya. And this guy, Bernie, said to me, listen, this guy is approaching us. He's getting ready to do something in this other sport, martial arts or whatever, and he needs a coordinator. He needs somebody. He's putting a group of people together, and we think you are the person he needs to talk to. Now, this was the day before the weigh-in for the Arturo Gatti, Oscar De La Hoya fight. So I said, well, listen, in between the weigh-in, if this guy can get here, that's the only time I can talk to him. Because I'm not doing it fight day. And you know how I am weigh-in day and fight day. Mm-hmm. I'm on point until after weigh-in and everybody gets back to the hotel and then lockdown, then I'm good to go. So he brought this guy over in between the weigh-in, said, listen, man, we'll meet, we'll talk for a minute. The guy came over, he said, listen, man, I'm doing this, I'm trying to start this organization. I'm trying to do a fight as quick as I can, but I'm trying to put a group of people together to help and coordinate. And they told me that you're the person that I need to talk to. And that person was Dana White. And Dana was, oh shit, I'm talking about 2000. So that's how, we're talking, what, 18 years ago?
Yeah, Dana still had hair.
Dark hair.
Dark hair, yeah.
and it was probably maybe about 180, if that.
Yeah.
And he said, listen, man, I'm going to do this, and I need you. And I said to him, I said, you know what? If you pay me and respect me, you got me. And you let me do my job, you got a better job done. I swear to you, the exact words. Pay me, respect me, you got me. You let me do my job, you got a better job done.
So in between the weigh-ins and fight day of De La Hoya, Arturo Gatti,
yes.
you met Dana White, and the rest is history.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And this was in November. I think Dana called me in December and said, I'm doing a fight in February. I think that since that phone call, I might have gotten maybe 4 more calls from Dana over the course of the 17 years, which was good because he never had a reason to call me.
He just left you alone.
Left. And that's the one thing I can tell you that what also always made my job easy, because I was allowed to do me. And Dana never, ever once disrespected me or tried to tell me how to do my job or what to do or let anybody else do it. So I went about it with ease. But you know what? I also knew that if I ever did anything to the left or the right, they would pull it back in the middle.
Sure. Man, and right after some time after you left the UFC, Burt, you got sick, right? You got prostate cancer.
Yes, sir. I had a tough 2.5, 3 years after I left. Because right after, and if I didn't leave when I did, something would have happened from a medical standpoint that I would have had to leave. Because right after I left, about 5 months after, my brother died. My oldest brother died unexpectedly. 4 months later, my mother, 3 months later or so, my mother had a stroke, ended up in the hospital, and ended up in a nursing home that I had to take care of her. During the course of my mother being sick and eventually kind of headed toward, Alzheimer's, I went to the doctor because, working around you guys and at the pace that I was at, I was doing like 40 shows a year.
I don't think everybody understands. You were on the road all the time.
Man, I would wake up, I would go to sleep in Japan and wake up in Brazil.
Yeah.
Go to sleep in Brazil and wake up in Chicago. And I did that I was always in a 10-round fight, and the fight was only 3 rounds. Okay. But I did that. So, but I always made sure you take care of your body and your mind, it'll take care of you. So I always made sure I took care of my body. So, I said, you know what, it's time to go get the old man check, which I did. I went to the doctor, got the old man check, which was everything.
Right.
And I went back to see him maybe about a month later or so. Now, this is in the time losing my brother. My mom's sick, and I'm taking care of her like every day in a nursing home, changing her clothes and washing her clothes because I didn't like the way the nursing home did her clothes and packed them in a closet. And I went to the doctor, and he said, well, you got 3 choices. You got chemo, radiation, or surgery. I said, 3 choices for what, bro? He said, you got prostate cancer. Now, this was also a doctor that had been my doctor for like 14 years when I was with Joe Frazier or more. So we had that kind of relationship that he talked to me like that. Because the way he said it to me, if he was just a strange doctor, that was not good bedside manners. But he said, you got those 3 choices. You got chemo, you got radiation, you got surgery. And I said, for what? He said, well, you got cancer. And I just looked at him and like, damn, cancer. He said, yeah. So I said to him, well, let's try to start. I'm not going to do surgery because I know damn well my body's not going to let me sit still for 3 months or 4 months with surgery. So I said, well, let's try to start with the chemo. And he told me what it was and the mixture and the stuff you had to. And I said, you know what? Let's do the radiation. So for 67 days, every morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, I was in a radiation center laid up on the table. Now, you do it from Monday to Friday. I still was working. I was still getting jobs and traveling and I was a little more, I don't want to say popular, but I got more jobs when I left the UFC and decided to go back to work, than I thought I did. So I did radiation from Monday to Thursday, and I left Thursday night to go on a job, to do a fight, and come back on Monday morning, was laid up on the table to do the radiation. And I went through 60 how many ever days of radiation, and we are now in October, May of this year, I found out that I was cancer-free.
Hell yeah,
and
man.
I didn't miss a beat, man. And I thank God, man. And I don't know how it happened, but I always thought cancer was a death sentence. I always thought cancer.
Yeah, but it sounded like you didn't let it be a death sentence.
No,
you just I'm gonna still Burt Watson, right? I'm still me. I'm gonna live while I'm alive.
Hey, man. And then shortly afterward, I did 2 PSAs about prostate cancer because I found out, number one, that it was hereditary. So I had to tell my son. Right. And number two, how prevalent it was in African-American men and men in general, starting at the age of 49.
49, yeah.
So I was out saying, go get tested. Go get tested. You gotta get tested.
It can save your life, right? A lot of us don't want to do it, Like hey. I got this saying, Bert, I call it DBAB. I'm going to send you a shirt,
Okay.
And DBAB, it means two things. It means don't be a bitch and don't be a bully. And the way that I define bitch is someone who lets their life be run by fear. And this is something I want to say a lot of men get really scared of and just avoid is the doctor. Because we don't want to find out that something's wrong, right? We're being bitches,
And that is so wrong. And you know what? If it were not for you guys and working around you guys, and everybody I worked around had a 9-pack. Everybody I worked around could fight.
Come on, man, not Roy Nelson. Roy Nelson didn't have a 9-pack. He can fight, but no 9-pack.
Yeah, Roy Nelson looked like me. Okay, but in good shape. So
yeah, for sure.
You know what? I had to continue that because I had to compete. I never had any type of arguments or physical or confrontation with any one of you guys. But in my head, I was saying, you know what? Sometimes the way I talk to these guys, if I catch somebody on a bad day cutting weight, I better be right.
Man, you didn't. You probably caught a lot of us on some bad days, but you didn't treat us, and like we talked about earlier, man. But you're cancer free now, and I know you're working. Like you did a lot of big push to tell men to debab a little bit, right, and not go get tested.
Man,
go get tested.
I went and I was tested. I went to the doctor and was tested a year and a half. In a year and a half, I went back and I was almost at stage 3, and my PSA was up to 8. In about a year and a half, man.
What's PSA?
Yes, that's my prostate level. That's when you go to check. Your PSA should always be at 0.
Okay.
Or 0 point something.
Got it.
When it starts getting to 2 or 3, then you're starting to show that's some problem. Mine was up to 8 in a year. And I was at stage 2 in a year. Well, a little over a year, but that was very quick. If I didn't think to go back, I wouldn't have caught it. And God rest his soul, Joe Frazier died of liver liver cancer. And that's probably because he didn't catch it in time and didn't go to the doctor. We stayed friends while I wasn't with him, and especially when I started with the UFC, we were still friends. Every now and then, when he would travel, I would see him. We came to Vegas once and I saw him. But if he had gone to the doctor and caught it, then he probably would have been alive today. And he didn't, and he passed away.
Yeah, man. We got to do that a little bit for ourselves. We got to take care of ourselves.
Man, you got to be aware of your health. You got to be aware of the health of the people around you. We live our lives from day to day.
We live like we're going to always have tomorrow is the problem.
Oh yeah.
We live like we're always going to have tomorrow.
We keep going, we all got to hustle to make that paycheck and hustle for the man. We know we got to be to work. We know we got to be in shape. You got to cut weight. You got a fight coming up. If you don't have a fight coming up, you're looking for a fight. You're trying to figure. And you know what? Only because you guys have to stay on weight and stay in shape are you conscious of going to the doctor. Mm-hmm. And that's also because you have to have, specifics, HIV, Hep B and C, and your EKG, and your eyes tested and dilated. Only because all those things are going on, you probably go and you get it tested. But the average guy, man,
he doesn't like it. I'm okay. I'm okay. Yeah.
So I would just like to say to everybody, you got to take care of you first before you can take care of anybody else. You better get tested.
Yeah, man. Burt, man, I can't thank you enough for everything you did for all of us. I think I speak for every single person that ever stepped foot in that octagon while you were working with the UFC. That you just made a very difficult time in our lives, right? Like that fight week, very stressful, very, very just consumed with a lot of things. You made that week easier. You made that week as easy as it could be. So, man, I thank you very much. Tell everyone where they can reach out to you on social media, where they can connect with you.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm going to tell you, you say I made it easy. You guys made it easy because you guys respected me as I always tried to respect you, and we shared the love, and you let me in that fraternity, and I will never, as long as I live, forget that. And I can always be reached at Burt Watson, the number 4 real. That's on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. Burt Watson, the number 4 real. Burt Watson. For real.
All right, man. I appreciate you coming on, talking to us, Burt, and sharing the stories, man. Like that, those are amazing stories. I thank you very much, Burt.
Hey, man. Anytime, my friend. Always.
All right, guys. That's it. See you next episode. All right, guys. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Gospel of Fire. Check me out on my website, EliotMarshall.com, where you can stay up to date on everything that is Gospel of Fire, Eliot Marshall related. Get DBAB t-shirts and whatnot. Also, my Patreon page, if you're liking the podcast and would like to support it, patreon.com/The Gospel of Fire. I'd much appreciate it. And my social media, as always, at FireMarshall205 on Instagram and Twitter. Eliot Marshall on Facebook, and Eliot Fire Marshall for a Facebook fan page. I appreciate everything. And remember, guys, the impediment of action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Let's do hard shit.